Welcome, everybody. We're here to discuss our daily Bible reading. We're in a little bit of a new location. We've got some things going on. We're trying to make small improvements here and there, hopefully to make these videos more enjoyable to experience.
For us and you.
We're all about the experience here. So let's just jump right in and talk about Deuteronomy. Our Bible reading was over Deuteronomy this last week. And what did you think? Well, let me start with this. I like asking this question. Did you do your reading?
I did my reading.
Okay, good.
I was saying earlier, maybe off camera, I don't remember now. We record so much that I finished it in listening to it as I've been saying, but it was several days ago. So there were several points that I noted in my mind that I wanted to talk about, but with everything going on and life at its pace, I know I've forgotten a few of those. But I still have some things rattling around in the old trap. So there's a lot there. Deuteronomy repeats a lot, but there's a little bit of new content. But I think you're going to talk about the tones a little bit different.
Yeah, it seemed different to me, so I was going to mention that.
Yeah.
So you mentioned the repetition. If you didn't notice as you were reading, this was a lot of the same stories. Like Moses is retelling the story that we've already read in Exodus and Numbers.
Well, maybe we should start there. Like, why is this book here? What's the point of the book? It is at the end of the 40 years of wandering. Right. And so Moses is now taking the new generation of people in. All the other people have died off, except for the Levites.
For the Levites, that's right.
We remember last week. All the other people have died off, so now he's recapitulating everything to this new group of people. Remember what God did, remember what we've been through, and then sort of the last half of it is now setting them up to move into the new land.
So into the 40 years. And the book is prefaced, I think I might have mentioned this at the very end of our last discussion last week, or you mentioned it, one of us did, that this is like, the book is prefaced with the idea that Moses is about to die.
Yep.
And so the whole concept of the book is this is kind of Moses' last chance to instill in the Israelites what they need to know, to convince them to be faithful to God. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot kind of going on with that interplay. I think of this almost as sort of we talk about like deathbed confessions or deathbed letters, or
does this sort of resemble Peter's letters, right? Or Paul maybe to Timothy.
Peter, you got 2 Timothy. Jacob has a similar thing. You've got David to Solomon. Like, there's all these stories where these people are like about to die and they know it, and this is what you have to know before I go. Right. And so there's part of that tone that I was going to mention was urgency. Like, there's a lot of urgency in what Moses is saying. It's a lot of the same things we've already read. It's the same laws. Same stories.
I mean, there's some new stuff, right? Because it's sort of more practical in some ways, that they've got to, now that you're going to occupy these cities, how do you do this, that, or the other?
Yeah.
But it's more of the same for sure.
Yeah. So a couple of things on the tone is that the urgency I noticed was different in this telling. The sort of the premise of, I think this is a fair way to say it, or what I was seeing as I was reading, it seemed to me like the premise of why the laws were important was changing. Like you were just saying, they're about to go into the land now. Mm-hmm. And so, yes, the laws were obviously important in the wilderness, but they take on new meaning when you're going to go. One of the things Moses says, you're going to go in and take these houses, and there's specific laws that are going to govern how they take people over, how they conquer people, how they handle their land and their trees and their houses. So there was maybe a different emphasis in this time than there was in Exodus and Numbers and Leviticus. That's some of the things I noticed.
I think that's true. And again, some of it gets really oddly specific unless you realize that's exactly what's happening. Again, here in Deuteronomy is where he's telling them to build fences around the roofs of their homes so people don't fall off.
That's right.
Because you don't want the blood guilt on you. So there's a whole lot in this about how are you going to live together in this new land. Again, so cities of refuge is something that comes up. The Levitical cities, the idea that they got to, and I think this was really stressed and important in this one. One of the things that stood out to me was there was this continued stress of you will go to where God sets up his house, and that's where you will go worship. Do not go and worship where the other people were worshiping. So, it's usually referred to as the high places, but there was a lot of that in here.
Yeah.
Right? Don't do what they do. You're going to do something totally different. And this goes back to, I think, our discussion in Leviticus in particular about being holy and different, and because God was living among them, and they were living with God.
It's not that teaching wasn't in Leviticus,
Right.
but the practical application was made much more clear in
Right.
Deuteronomy based on the fact that they're about to go
They're
experience it
literally
firsthand.
about to go.
Yeah.
Like it's just from the beginning of Deuteronomy, it's only like a few weeks, right, until the end, I think. So. And again, definitely different. Another thing that stood out to me was there were a couple things, but I'll just go with one right now and then see what you have to say. There was this, and this was great because a lot of people will think, well, the God of the Old Testament's different than the God of the New Testament, even though there's a change in law and so on, and a whole lot of discussion there. But people wonder, how could this one God be different? Why was he so focused on certain things? Well, again, we have a people moving into a nation. Those nations are being punished. And so one of the themes that comes up is Moses repeats, they're not getting pushed out of the way because you're good. They're getting removed because they are wicked. This is not because you're so special. I'm not your God because you're so special. I'm your God because I want to be, right? And then I am going to move in front of you, and then you're going to follow the commands to deal with these people. And there were different commands. The people that were inside the border where they were moving, they had one way they had to deal with them, which was basically to completely eradicate them. But there were rules for other people they might deal with later that were outside of the area. They weren't supposed to do that. I found that kind of thing really fascinating, that God's setting up kind of a long-term future here. But at the heart of it was they are corrupt. That's why they're being removed. And then on top of that, don't do what they did.
Yeah. So a couple things, I'll just piggyback off of that. That idea that they're going to be destroyed, the people inside the territory, because of their sin, is something that goes back to Genesis 15 when God was first talking to Abraham. So that's another thing that people often come to texts like Deuteronomy, and then later we're going to get into Joshua where they actually conquer the people.
Actually do it.
And people look at that and say, well, how horrendous that God would order them to do that. But if we've been reading the Bible carefully since Genesis, we know that God has allowed them all this time to repent. He's been patient with them. And so some of those criticisms of God in Scripture fall a little bit flat for me. One of the other things that I just find fascinating about Deuteronomy, there are a number of things in Deuteronomy that very clearly point to future events down Israel's timeline. And I'm sure I'll miss some here, but you mentioned the destruction of the people. They're going to go in. He says, wipe them out. Of course, that's going to be, that's the very next thing. Right. So you say, well, that's not that odd. One of the things that I noticed I was reading, and it just sort of struck me as interesting this time, was God specifically told the Israelites, God through Moses told the Israelites, make sure when you get in that land that you totally wipe out the Amalekites. And that it's just like a paragraph where he said that. And he said the reason was because they're the ones who came out, if you remember the story at the Exodus, they're the ones who came out and attacked you. They tried to discourage you right off the bat. So I have no use for them. They're wicked. Wipe them out. That story's not going to be told until Saul is king.
Right.
And Saul's going to fail to do that.
Right.
And these Amalekites are going to kind of be a thorn in their side. So that's just one example. Deuteronomy has all these little hints of like story. It's like a bunch of, there's a term, I can't think of it, but just these hints, these nuggets.
Like foreshadowing.
Well, yeah, it is foreshadowing, but it's just like, if you're looking for it, you'll see a lot of these stories pop back up. And that's true when we get into the blessings and curses section at the end, when he talks about what's going to happen if you don't keep my covenant. There was this pretty gruesome section.
All of that happens, right?
All of it.
All of it happens.
Yeah. I don't know if y'all enjoyed reading about the women who are going to eat their babies, and the siege and all this.
Let me ask you, like your one of your kids and a couple friends are reading this together. Like it's really neat. They're reading it on their own together.
We're talking like third, fourth, fifth grader age. Yeah.
And so, what have they said anything about some of that or?
Well, so no, they are going at a little bit of a slower pace now.
Okay.
And so they're not quite up to Deuteronomy. I will say they've read some pretty intense stuff. Sure. They've read through Leviticus, and they haven't asked as many questions as maybe I expect them to. And I think as they continue reading some of those questions, because some of this, again, we talked about repetition. The more they read it, the more it hits them over and over again. Right. I think those questions will come.
Right.
But no, they have not asked me directly. They've asked me other great questions, but not about some of the gruesome stuff that I would have expected.
But remember, that's the point of the repetition,
yes.
Right? They didn't have the luxury of reading like we do. They heard and heard. They were taught this by ear, by mouth, and they heard and heard and heard. And so the repetition is what parks all this information in their minds, so they can remember. And again, Deuteronomy is also full of that. When you go into the land and your children ask you about such and such, you tell them, right? Talk about it. Make it part of your life, which is a great lesson for us.
Absolutely.
Today.
Absolutely. What else about Deuteronomy? Anything else?
It was related to, I forgot.
You forgot all the good stuff.
It was related to that. So again, God's telling them, I'm your God, because I want to be, and I'm not clearing them out. And then I thought and this was kind of funny. To me, it's funny to look, and you mentioned it, right? All this foreshadowing. He's going to tell them, so when you ask for a king, here's the rules about being a king. I think around chapter 17 or so. Here's the rules. And then, of course, they do it, many, many decades or centuries later. And Samuel's angry. I mean, we'll get there shortly. Mm-hmm. We're not that far away. The books are going to start being smaller. We'll have multiple books. And so I find that mildly amusing that then when they get there and then, of course, the kings don't follow those rules and things continue to get worse. As you said, all of this stuff that's said will happen in the blessings and cursings is going to happen. And a lot of it is because of these guys who are king.
Yeah.
Some of them are good, but not all of them, and none of them are perfect. But God basically says, or through Moses, basically says in this book, and this I found again humorous but sad. He said, "You're going to do all this."
Yes.
Like this, he gives them the blessings and cursings, but you're going to do all this, and all of this is going to happen because he calls them stubborn and weak, and. I don't know how I would have taken that in the moment.
Yeah. If I read it correctly, and feel free to correct me if I've got this wrong, but the way it seemed to read to me this go round, Moses, especially in that last section with all the blessings and curses, all of that is to be described to the people. Mm-hmm. They're all supposed to understand these consequences. Mm-hmm. And then it almost seemed to me, if I read it correctly, that God spoke to Moses as an aside and said, listen, you've told them all these laws.
Yeah.
You've relayed their history to them.
Very much could be.
They're not going to do it.
Yeah.
They're not going to live up to the expectation, which almost, you're talking about Moses is like pouring his heart out. And that's one of the last things he hears is, good effort. They're not going to do it.
Moses has given 40 years to these people, really, longer,
but
40 years to these people, 40 long, frustrating, difficult years. And think, he's not going into the promised land because of his own sin, right? Mm-hmm. We read about that earlier. But if they had gone in the first time, he would have gotten to go in. Everything would have been quite different for him and, of course, for a lot of people. And so not to take away from Moses' presumption there, but he has a lot he could complain about. Yeah. But Moses, as you know, you and I have talked, Moses is one of my favorite characters. Yeah. I'm kind of working on this Moses project. He went through a lot. He dealt with a lot, and he never complains.
Yeah,
which is a contrast to the people because they always complain.
Yeah.
So kind of getting this sort of almost like an epitaph for Moses.
Yeah.
And here God tells them, well, they're going to fail.
Yeah.
That would be difficult.
Yeah. There are. I'm just trying to think about Moses's attitude throughout the story, and it may be a slight overstatement to say he never complains. There's
He's
a few
angry.
moments.
He's angry.
There's a few moments where he talks to God like, "What? These are your people. What are you doing? You know, deal with them."
Right.
But on the whole, I think you're right. Especially that contrast between Moses and Israel becomes really, really stark. Well, I'll tell you what. Let's if you're okay with it, let's transition and look ahead a little bit.
Let's do it.
Because next week, what we've got on the docket is the book of Joshua. And so, as Mike says, the books are going to get shorter. The history is also going to get a little bit faster. We've kind of been camped out on this period of time. We're going to move through history quicker. And so we're going to read Joshua, and then I think we're going to read the first...
roughly the first half of Judges.
Yeah, so we're going to get into Judges.
So Joshua's going to take us like another 40 years, give or take, right? Or something like that,
Okay.
50 years until he dies. Then we get into Judges, which is several hundred years, really compressed into... And the book of Judges is super interesting, and you know.
Well, so we're getting into some fun stuff.
Yeah.
We're getting into some gory stuff, but like if I tell people if you like reading, if you like espionage, if you like war stories, if you like romance, if you like the Bible's got a little bit of everything. You know, you've got all of these different kinds of stories, and I feel like that's really on display in Joshua and Judges.
Oh yes.
Because the variety of kinds of stories, like you've got spies going into secretly, spy out lands. You've got strategic war plans that are at play. Just a lot of fun stuff that's going to be, I think, really interesting to read. But the basic storyline we're going to follow is this is where Israel's going to move into the land, and they're going to conquer it. And we're going to see their successes in that. They're ultimately successful, but they have their shortcomings.
But not 100%.
Yeah.
I mean, God does say in Deuteronomy, I'm not going to drive them all out. Or maybe it was Numbers. I'm not going to drive them all out because, then that would just make it empty and the wild beasts would come. But I'm going to drive them out in front of you. But then they never finish that. And that's going to be a huge thorn in their side. And again, to your point about the Amalekites, they're still around. They're
still around.
Hundreds of years later. And, Jewish tradition says Haman might have been an Amalekite there in Esther. So it's gonna pick up the pace in those terms, and then we'll kind of come to Kings, and it'll kind of, maybe it slows down a little bit because there's a lot, of course, happening at that point. So for a little while though, we're gonna have multiple books to talk about.
Yeah, and
we're gonna have a special guest.
I think we're gonna have a special guest, maybe two. So stay tuned for that. It's exciting. I'll tell you what, maybe we end it there, and we just encourage you to read the Bible with us. That's really all we're trying to do here, is we're just trying to encourage one another to read the Bible, and we're trying to bring as many people along the ride with us as we can. And so if you are doing the Bible reading with us, we appreciate it. We'd love for you to comment on how you're doing on this video or any of other videos. Let us know how it's going for you. We'd love for you to subscribe and, get the notifications to see when we're pushing out content about this Bible reading plan. But most importantly, what we are most concerned about is we just want you to be in the Bible. We want you to be reading it. And so if there's any way that we can encourage you in that, that's what we're trying to do.
That's what we're here for. Trying to make it easier for you to get the reading done, encourage you to do it, answer some questions, give you some things to think about along the way. But again, ask us anything you want. We'll give us the best answer that we can.
Very good. Let's leave it there.
Yeah.
We'll see you guys later. Have a good one.